Hello, all. Welcome to my podcast, American Dream. In 30-minute episodes, we will hear from successful Turkish professionals about their journey from Turkey to the USA. My main objective is to inspire young people in Turkey who consider a similar path. My guest today is Gizem Uzunbaş, cancer biologist with experience in target identification and validation with ultimate aim to develop novel small molecules against oncogenic mutations and dependencies. Hello, Gizem. Are you ready?
I'm ready. Yes.
Welcome to my podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here. Let's start with icebreaker questions.
Mhm.
Now, we all have a story to tell. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being terrified of public speaking, 10 being born a storyteller, where would you rate yourself?
6 to 7, I guess. Let's say 7.
Mm-hmm. And what is one Turkish food you miss the most?
One Turkish food I miss the most. I think I miss street foods the most. Yeah.
And what is one thing that surprised you most about American work culture?
Work culture.
Yeah.
So it's mainly result and solution oriented rather than problems. And people are mainly hardworking. And the most surprising thing that I've seen, most people love what they do, or they try to find something that they love on what they are doing.
And what is one funny language barrier you encountered?
Yeah, it's hard. Like, I feel like I'm a more prompt person in Turkish, but in English, I sometimes need to think a little more for what I say or choosing the right words. So I feel like I sometimes don't, can't be so prompt easily or don't laugh in English so easily. Yeah.
And now let's start with the questions.
Mhm.
Gizem, can you give our listeners a quick glimpse into a typical workday for you and what your job entails?
Yeah, sure. So I'm a research scientist in Broad Institute, which is an institute from MIT and Harvard, which we do collaborate with companies for drug discovery purposes. So we basically have lots of meetings through the day, but I try to organize my week in advance. So if I have experiments to organize, I do organize those. And in between, I get into my meetings, and I'm a project manager at the same time. So I need to manage a group of people. So we also have some meetings too. Sorry,
No
not my
problem.
phone, but we try to organize some meetings to be aligned with these people also in my group at the same time. So I'll say mostly experiments in meetings with different groups of people. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And what does your job like for your job? What do you do exactly? Like, if you could give specifics into.
Sure. So it's a wet lab science, which means we generally work in the lab. Either with living organisms. In my case, I work with cancer cells or animals, or it could be any materials that we isolate from living organisms. Could be protein, DNA, RNA, to figure out the signaling paths induced with different chemicals.
I see.
Mhm.
And did you have this job before you moved to the US, or was this a gradual process of obtaining this job, or like a sudden switch?
Yeah, so I don't know if I could say that I have that job, although I was a research assistant in Turkey while I was doing my undergrad and master's work. So I did my undergrad in Turkey and then my master's in Turkey. So I was also doing research that I get paid from. So it was kind of my job within the lab that I work as a student. So I was doing similar stuff, but here I do organize or plan my experiments, and I do write the project proposals myself. So I will say it's like a gradual process that made me to grow in this area to be more independent.
Mhm. I see. And when did the idea of moving to the US first take root?
Uh, What was the question? The idea for?
Oh yeah, the idea of moving to the US. When did you like begin the
Yeah.
process, or like how did it happen?
Yeah, it wasn't really very well planned idea. I was mainly thinking to move to Europe for my graduate studies. But then that time my boyfriend, now my husband, was doing a internship in US, and he asked me to visit to see if he thinks that I will enjoy this area, because I normally didn't think that we will be in US. So I came visiting and I like it. The thing that I like most about US that I didn't feel like a foreigner. In Europe, I feel like more of a foreigner, but in general in US, you don't really feel like, who belongs here or who doesn't originally. So I like the idea. Yeah.
And before making the move, what steps did you take to bridge the gap, let's say?
Yeah, so I did my PhD here. So that was the move made me to come here. Otherwise, it's not easy to come to work here directly. So I was still thinking to gain experience in the academic world. And also in Turkey, I had my master's to make me a better wet lab scientist, because I didn't have enough experience in my undergraduate for that. And I tried to publish my work to make it visible to other people, because you need to show your work to others in some way. And also attending some meetings and networking will be a key, which may not be easy for most of the Turkish people, but I think they should try their best to work their work and to show their work and to show their personality, working personality. Yeah.
And I just have a question. This is more
Mhm.
personal for me as well. Maybe some
Yeah.
kids in Turkey can relate as well. But as a high schooler in America,
Yeah.
most people need to publish their own works. And could you entail what that publishing of your work had, or like how'd you publish your, bio work or something?
Yeah. So like you need to find innovative thinking for what you are doing. And for a high schooler, it may not be that easy, but the best way to be, if you feel like you're really interested in an area, it's easy for a high schooler in US to reach out to the experts of the area. And I would probably reach out to these experts to see what you could be useful for that research. And just because you're interested, then you should do your best to work on that. I was reading some articles from some Turkish newspapers, for example, like there are kids interested in some bug biology, and they like to observe bugs, and then they were reaching out to these professors who is working on specific like little organisms, and they do work together and they can publish together. So if you feel like you can add something to that work, and you can definitely, if you're interested, I will just reach out to the experts and do my best to contribute.
And on the topic of reaching out to experts, how important do you think it is for young Turks to come here and network to start their business or start their career?
It will be really important. Networking is very important for anyone, not only for a high schooler, for anyone. So I'll try my best. I'm not a good networker in general, and I feel like I see people around, whoever could network the best does better in general. Yeah.
And you touched base on how moving to the US was more like a sudden decision-ish kind of
Mhm.
stuff.
Mhm.
And could you expand upon that? Was it a leap of faith, would you say? Or like, how did you calculate the risk of moving to the US?
I don't think it was a leap of faith. It wasn't like we were risking something or it was something that people cannot believe it. So it was a gradual thing, and we were kind of like calculating the risks and everything, and we were thinking we'll just try, because it's not easy. Like, you always go with the words that you hear from others, but you should also experience yourself to see if it will be a good fit for you. Um, we just wanted to try, and we were like, okay, if we don't like it, we can turn back. We don't need to be here forever. And we were always saying, okay, after grad school we can turn back, or after grad school we can work a couple years and turn back. And we did not consider turning back yet. So we are still here. It's been like 15 years so far. And when you have kids, also your plans change a little bit too. So we are happy to stay here. So it was more like a gradual and risk calculated steps for us, and we were always going like that. Yeah.
What do you think was the biggest pro and con for moving to the US for your career or for your family?
Pros and cons. The biggest cons, of course, we miss a lot our family, friends, and culture in Turkey. And for the pros, I'll say I really love what I do work-wise. And I also like gaining that self confidence and independence of the kids from younger ages, because we didn't gain that in Turkey. We did not raise with that self-confidence really. So a young person wasn't really a person in that mindset up. I don't know, it could be a time thing too. Maybe things are different in Turkey as well, but I feel like for kids, they're being more independent and self-confident in general, which I like about it. And I like my work environment. The best thing that I work about my work environment, the emotions aren't like the emotional things are not that important. So in Turkey, there's like always, we are emotional people, and people always tend to put other meanings on other messages, but it's not necessary. You just do your work. You are more work oriented. So I really like that work environment.
And as I know in CS, you can just like sit down in the summer and like write a program, write a project, whatever you do. But in bio, it's a little bit different. I know like you need a lab and like equipment. And for someone like who's planning to go into the biofield, what do you think is the best preparation for them to do? Because it's not really accessible to, you know, to go to a lab in your house. That's not really a thing you can do.
True. Yeah. Great question. I'll probably read as much as I can because like reading is really important to have an idea what is happening in the rest of the world. And there are actually good labs in Turkey. I'll try my best to get in those labs as an intern or an observer, because you learn a lot when you get into that environment. And that was the first thing that I've done for myself. I was in a public university for my undergrad, and then I go to a private university for my master's with a scholarship, which I was able to observe a better lab environment in general. So I feel like it could be different now, but most of the private universities has really good research environments. So they can definitely observe it. And even for high schoolers that I know, they can attend programs for a couple of weeks in like places like Sabancı University or Koç University in Istanbul or other places in Turkey. So that will be really helpful.
Was there a moment when you felt truly arrived in your American career? How did you find your voice and establish yourself for the unfamiliar work environment?
Yeah, so you should really understand the environment. What are the deliverables? What are the problems and what you could do best? Because everyone has their own ways of doing an angle, doing the best. So you can definitely see that, find that. And knowing the people that you work with is also another advantage, because everybody is different. Now also I met I'm managing couple people. Also, I need to change my managing style according to those people. So observing the people and the environment, the way they do their work is important. And as I always say, concentrating on the solution rather than the problem is another thing that I learned through my experience. Yeah, and I feel like with my current position right now, I feel like that's the place that I could find most of these things that I feel like, okay, this is the job that I really want to do.
And from your experience, what are the top 3 things one should prioritize in their preparation process to move to a career abroad in the US?
And obviously language. So they need to be like I was going to schools that the teaching language was English, but the education language versus the life language is totally different, daily life language. So they should definitely have a good English or whatever language that they're interested in that country. The second thing will be a good education for sure, and they should focus really good on what they're interested in, because once you are able to show that you're good at what you're doing, that opens a lot of doors. The third thing is understanding, I guess, the work scope and the work environment. Yeah.
And could you share a funny, quick anecdote about your early American work experience that you found unexpected?
Yeah, it's again these emotional, I guess, meanings. When I first came to my PhD, the first PhD lab that I joined for my graduate studies, I was doing a rotation. I think I could count it as a work day because I was being mainly paid by this research that I was working on. My advisor didn't communicate with me until I received my first result. And I was always thinking, like, what did I do wrong? Like, doesn't she like something about me? I was always trying to put more meanings on it. But basically, she was just so busy. And when I first received my first result, she then had a constant communication with me throughout my PhD. So I was like, it changed dramatically. So she was just having her professional life in general. And it's funny, she's normally like limited in communication with other people. Whenever we have a farewell or something, she always writes best wishes to the card. Like, this is the longest sentence that she writes in general. When I was graduating, she wrote me a whole paragraph. So that was a huge like surprise for all of us. People were so excited, even in the like other people in the letter, like, she wrote you such a big paragraph, like, because I was always thinking in the beginning, like, there should be a reason she's behaving like that, but no, this is the way she was working. And then she adjusted herself a little bit for me, and I just myself being less emotional and more professional in general. So we met at the middle, and now we still have a relationship with her, a good relationship. Yeah.
And on that topic, do you think people who are moving to the US should ask for help as much as they can? Or, do you think, like, as in your case, will they always be, helpful in the end? Or,
You mean asking help from other Turkish
yeah,
people?
or like anyone in general in
Yeah, I
America?
think they should just try. Worst case, they will just get refused, and that's okay.
Hmm.
And it will still teach them something. Yeah. I actually was not able to my PhD advisor for a long time before I get into the program. And she wasn't replying to my emails or anything. And then I seen her in a meeting, and I followed her behind her to talk to her. She was shocked for a while, but then she said she really liked it because it shows how dedicated I was for her lab. So I think if it helps, like, even if it doesn't help them, it will teach them something. So if they're really interested, they should just try. Yeah.
And lastly, how did your work ethic or career goals change after moving to the US?
Um, hmm. I think I definitely leave that emotional thinking behind, like as much as I could. And I try to be more self-confident because normally I was more quiet in general. I am pushing myself a lot to like ask more questions um, instead of being quiet and trying to figure out myself. Um, yeah, and I think work-life balance could be a problem for some places because most of the Americans do work a lot. But if it depends, if you really like what you're doing, you can really balance it and you can be really more effective. Um, yeah, and as I said, like most of the Americans that I've seen either love what they're doing or they find a way, like something about it that they love. I was really impressed, for example, the janitor that works in our institute said, I can work in other places, but I find it more valuable to work here because you are trying to find a solution for cancer. So I feel more happy here. So if you have a motivation for what you're doing, there's always like your sky is your limit. You can always try more, you can be more innovative. this is what I really like. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And do you think, on that topic, do you think the American dream of like everyone working towards a goal is like still possible? And like, do you think it's, you know, the American dream idea of coming up from nothing and working towards a thing you believe, do you think that's possible still in America?
Definitely possible, yes. And I always feel like, you know, people ask me if I will be in Turkey to be useful for Turkey. And I feel like I could be more useful for Turkey if I stay here because I feel I have more tools, innovative ideas are more possible to accomplish here. And I feel like I have a more direct impact if I work here. Now we have drugs in clinical trials, which excites me a lot. So I don't know how it could be possible in Turkey too, but it's more likely to happen here. So I feel like if I stay here, it's not, maybe it's a Turkish dream too. It's not only an American dream. I am staying in here and establishing a dream, not only for America, but for the other parts of the world easier too.
Mm-hmm. And that'll be all the questions for today. Thank you so much for your time, Gizem. And
Of course, thank you.
thank you for sharing your inspiring story with others and our listeners. And I hope that the story will be modeled after somewhere in Turkey. And thank you.
Thank you so much.